Dave, let me begin with you. You have an amazing story. Your story is this, that you actually engaged with FMF Financial for your retirement and your retirement planning. And now you actually are serving with FMF Financial as an estate and gift planner in the Southeast region of the US. I mean, like, how did that happen? Just give us like the snapshot of this amazing story.
I loved my job. I was in retail management for over 40 years and just loved it. And I wouldn't plan on retiring. I would answer the same question, when I die. But they wanted to move me to an area. And I got thinking, well, I'm 61. Do I really want to do this? And I was fortunate enough to be with Guys Green Financial, where I went to Scott and I said, Scott, how am I doing? Do I have enough money to retire? And that's the questions we asked. And Scott came back and says, according to the reports, at age 80, you'll have this amount of money, and age 90, you'll have this. And it made my decision really easy. In our park, at our age, we are doing more things down here to help needy people outside of our park. And so as you do get older, I see great opportunities just to say, I'm retired. We can actually go out and share and give to other people. So it's been a blessing.
In many instances, that retirement represents freedom to serve, freedom to do things that they always dreamed that they could potentially do, and having the margin in their lives to be able to dream bigger than they maybe were able to dream while they were working. And so those years many times can turn into ministry years above and beyond the ministry that they were doing while they were employed somewhere. Being free to serve, free to do those things. And I've seen it played out in the way that, like, as a member of a congregation, where, naturally to have them come alongside the pastoral leadership to provide all kinds of sustaining roles in their experience in what they did during their professional career. And as that comes into play in the actual congregation, and it can be a beautiful thing. To provide those leadership skills that were learned, and then to be able to, move those forward in some very dramatic ways.
And one thing that I learned early on in my career, particularly working with pastors, is when I would ask, what's your retirement goal, or when are you going to retire? Quite often the answer was, when I die. I'm going to do this as long as I can. So in their mind, retirement was not a thing. Retirement was when I go to Jesus, then I'm retired. So I had to rephrase the question and ask them, rather than asking, when do you want to retire? The question was, when do you want to be financially independent so that you're in a position that you don't have to have earned income? And I got all sorts of answers when I asked it that way. Mm-hmm. And they would say, by the time I'm X age, I want to be able to go in the mission field and not have to worry about fundraising. Or I want to leave my large church that I'm pastoring and go work for a small church and for free, so they don't have to pay me. And those are the types of things that they had those on their heart and in their mind. It didn't come out when I asked them, when do you want to retire? They're like, well, I'm not going to. But when I asked them, when do you want to be in a position where you don't have to have earned income? All sorts of things came out.
I think there's this stigma sometimes that comes with planning, and people will avoid planning regardless of what kind it is, because they feel like they're going to be constricted. They're going to be limited with what they can do. But the reality, especially like when you were speaking, Kirk, it kind of hit a nerve or hit something there where, if we do this kind of planning, it actually gives purpose to your retirement years. It's not that I just have to keep working and working and working without an end in sight and I'm never going to retire. And for some people, that's great because they really love their work. But I think for other people, they just don't have any other purpose. And I think by putting a plan in place, it really allows them to dream big and become, and maybe Tim, you said this, become something bigger than they thought they could be. And I think that's really the benefit of doing that kind of planning, is it doesn't restrict you or constrict you. It really expands what you can do, and it allows you to create this possibility that you didn't even know was there. So I think that's really a huge benefit of doing that kind of planning.
Dave, when it comes to retirement, let me return to you. How would you encourage, or what would you say to people who are, say, in their early 20s they're getting started, they're out of college, they're not sure, they've got this student debt, they've got whatever, and they're not sure how they're going to do it. If you could say something to them like, if I could rewind the clock, I would have done X differently. What is that? Like, what kind of wisdom would you impart to them?
Well, one thing I think about is that where we live in Spring Arbor, the college has a program where they hook you up with college students, which really was a nice thing for us. We met some great kids, but we have one couple that we got working with, and they come to church with us and come to our house, and we go to dinner and things like that, and came pretty close to this young couple who ended up getting married. But the one thing we did talk a lot about, planning, setting money aside, and they just end up being so impressed with them. They come up with, I talked to them probably about 6-7 years after they graduated from college, and it's amazing. They've got their student debt almost paid off. They've got money saved, and they're ahead of the game. And I'm not saying I did it, but just talking about it and thinking about it, that's where it really has to start. Someone's got to explain to them, this is a possibility. This is another way of life. And I'm just so impressed with those two young kids.
As you talk to people and they say, well, I could never retire, or I've heard a couple things. One is either I could never retire because I don't have enough resources. It's just not in my future. Or especially for people in ministry, like, I'm never going to retire, because they feel like that's, once a calling's on your life, it like never ends. It just never ceases. So how do you help people who have this vision, like, I will be working until the day I die, to still plan and understand that there can be a good reason to do that?
With retirement planning, the sentiment that I get from a lot of people is that, oh, you've never seen anything like me. Nobody has it as bad as me. And they think it's just such a scary concept. But when you're able to share stories and say, you know what, I've seen this before, and the end result isn't as bad as you think, I think it helps people realize it's not all doom and gloom, and it helps them engage and realize that, man, we really can do something, and it's not as bad as you might think. So I think just helping them, begin that conversation is probably the hardest part. And then once you do that, floodgates kind of open, and it becomes a lot easier to engage.
I find that people discount the importance of time in the equation when we're talking specifically about retirement. So they'll maybe say to me, how do I start saving for retirement? I don't have a lot of wiggle room in my budget. I have an emergency fund set up. I have a budget that's, pretty workable, but does $20 really make a difference? Yes. $20 makes a difference. Especially if you're 22, $20 a month makes a huge difference. Because they don't take into account the span of time and the compounding of that. But I think regardless of the stage in life where they start with that tiny quote, quote, contribution, it's developing the faithfulness, developing a behavior. So it starts out with $20, but the value isn't as much. My perspective, the value isn't as much in the $20 as it is in the discipline and the behavior and the pattern. So that then when you get expanded, because that's what the Lord does, he expands people, or you get even in the natural world, you get a promotion, you get a 2% raise in January or something like that. Then you think, oh, maybe I'll make that $25. Maybe I'll make it $35 because you've already developed a behavior. So I try to encourage people to just do that and don't think about it as too small.
One of the things that we see on the giving side after they've worked with one of our planners is many times they had these resources and they would think that they would be so dependent upon them. But because they plan so well, they find that here's money that if they didn't really plan well for it moving forward from where they're at in retirement, it would be adversely taxed if they tried to give it maybe to a person. But yet there's a number of scenarios as we work with them where if they have any desire at all to benefit a ministry, then they can put plans together that will benefit ministry, but also benefit family in some very dramatic ways. We call it a give it twice trust or give it twice arrangement where you can actually give to your family, also give to the ministries that you most love and appreciate. And most people that we meet with, they don't have that perspective coming into the conversation. But after that conversation fully develops, and if it's appropriate, then we would begin to have that next step conversation to say, here's how these resources could be used to do giving.
In the planning process, if we can demonstrate to somebody, you have enough to take care of you with multiple scenarios. So if you have an illness or there's a catastrophe or whatever, you're okay financially. When they internalize it and believe it, then all sorts of other things start happening. So then they are spreading their love to family and ministries and other things.
Especially if you're in conversation with the Lord, he's gonna, he could be pointing you in a different direction tomorrow from where you're heading today. And I think we always have to be open to that. And I think proper planning will allow us to make those changes, allow us to be a little more nimble, and gives us, again, that liberty, gives us that freedom to obey where the Lord's calling us to go.